Narayam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jyodire. Nishta prayashu bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevya bhagavati uttamashuki bhaktir bhavati naistiki. Nigamaka paduragaritam param shukamakaravintam shamyatam pibata bhagatam rashamariyam mahora horoshi bhavukam. Krishna swadam upagate damagirihi karonashtadvishamisha paranako dunoditaham. Tramapiyada vishuddha vishuddham vipu samapirena bidam biduksaram prakyahiduhur maharadi tatmanam sanklesha nirvanam asanti nanyataham. Om Ganati Maranyasha Ganangana Sanaka Chaksuruan Miritam Yanatashmai Sri Gurave Namam Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yanavutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Samsadevam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Paridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Larita Shivishikan Vitam Stam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanam Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nirvishesa Sanyavadi Praskata De Satani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Transcendental Tuesday, Raleigh, you and me, man. 5 people online, but only one has commented. Divya Josie, thank you very much for giving us a Hari bowl. A Hari bowl from Divya Josie and a Hare Krishna from Raleigh Waller. That means the day is off to a good start. We've got 6 people so far online, but we encourage you to like or to comment, even if it's only a Hare Krishna, so we know who you are. Vai Bobby has come online there, one by one, slowly but surely. The rock is rolling down the hill, gathering a bit of momentum, and momentum is what we're all about. In case you hadn't guessed, this is the mating season of the peacocks. They like to gather on the roof of the ashram, so we're watching with some of the volunteers, Paul and I, actually, and Vi. We're watching this new video done by scholars from the Oxford Center of Hindu Studies, run by Sanaka Rishi. It's called India's Book of Wisdom. It's on the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's 1 hour long. And it's a nice presentation on the Srimad Bhagavatam. You hear from Radhika Raman and Sanaka Rishi, as well as Garuda Das and many other scholars concerning the relevance of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I think the defining comment in the 1 hour and 3 minute long movie was, you cannot understand Indian culture without understanding Bhagavatam. There's no other literature that had such a profound, permeating, all-pervasive effect on Indian architecture, literature, poetry, drama, and dance, and music, as has the Srimad Bhagavatam. Many of the same stories are told in the Mahabharata, but in the Mahabharata, you have a lot of other things like jnana, fruitive activity, mental speculation. The Bhagavatam is only about bhakti. Bhakti is something that every man, woman, and child can muster up. Not all of us are big scholars, and not all of us are successful materialists. Not all of us are practicing karma yogis. But all of us have devotion in one form or another. And when we purify that sense of devotion, which is already there, we come to the lotus feet of Krishna. So it is bhakti, which is the common denominator for all living beings. It is universal. And the penultimate presentation of bhakti, pure devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord, is Vyasadeva's magnum opus, the Srimad Bhagavatam. If you get a chance, see it. Don't search on YouTube Srimad Bhagavatam. I made that mistake. There are hundreds and hundreds of Srimad Bhagavatam classes on the YouTube. Here's a tip to save you a lot of time and frustration. Search India's Book of Wisdom, Srimad Bhagavatam. You'll get it about 3 days faster than you would if you just search Srimad Bhagavatam. Anjali. Good morning, Anjali. I know you've got a demanding work schedule, but We always appreciate your comments, even if you have to run off and catch the rest of this later. Post as many comments as you can while you're here, Anjali. Anjali learns. She retains the knowledge by writing, which I highly recommend. You know that. I recommend this over and over again. But she writes in the comment section so that we can all embed the knowledge and the points of philosophy. All the better. So thank you very much for doing that, Anjali. Jana Hasler. Hello, True. Hope all is going well. Great to be here this morning. It's great to have you, Jana. It's great also to have Natasha Johnson. She's come back for, I think, the third or fourth consecutive day. And it's the second consecutive day that we're revisiting this verse. It is the 10th verse in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam, if you happen to have it in front of you. Good morning, Rob. Hare Krishna. Suprabhatam, they say in India. Suprabhatam means may your day be auspicious, starting with these dawn hours. Once again, Vyasadeva, the great sage, literary incarnation of God, writes, Nayad Vichashtita Param Haresha Jagat Pavitam Tadvayasham Tirtamushanti Nanyara Nyatarham Shan and Amantia Shikshayaham. And Nayad Vichashtitam Parahare, those words which do not describe the lotus-like feet, the feet which give shelter to all suffering souls from within the universe, those words which do not describe the glories of the lotus-footed Lord, and which alone, words of Shiva, words of Ganesh, words of Lakshmi, words of Saraswati, words of Kuvara, words of Indra, do not achieve the same universally purificatory effect as words describing Lord Vishnu. Words describing Lord Vishnu stand in a category all their own, above and beyond any of the words describing the demigods. They said words describing and glorifying Vishnu alone, exclusively, can purify the entire universe. Jagat Pavitam Pragiti Karid. Otherwise, those who have Narayan, who have the lotus feet of Krishna, every time someone comes to the temple, we take the Shatari, it's the crown with the feet on top. It's usually made of silver. It's quite a beautiful objet d'art in and of itself. But we put the crown on the head of the husband, the wife, the child. And we say, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadabasanti Suryo Dabiva Chaksoradatam Yadri Pashva Panyavu Yagavam Sam Saminide Vishnu Yaparam. And they fold their hands and duck down in a submissive posture. And among animals, when one animal is showing submission to another animal, kind of hunches its shoulders and ducks down. Otherwise, if you look someone straight in the eye, it's taken as a challenge. I remember I was in East Los Angeles once, and Bobby was inside of an art store shopping, and I was just outside rather than sit in the car, getting some sun, leaning against the back of the car. I was kind of idly glancing around, and I had no idea that my glance might have lingered on this one particular gangbanger a little longer than he liked. Just out of nowhere, this guy came up to me and, "What are you staring at me for?" He was ready to fight. And I wasn't even aware that I had even looked at him. I said, "I'm not staring at you. Don't flatter yourself." But in the animal kingdom and in the human kingdom also, if you stare at somebody, that's a challenge. You're challenging them. They take it that you're trying to emasculate them, take their females away from them, and steal their wealth, and steal their cattle, and steal their wives. That's what a stare communicates to the materially attached person. So when people come into the temple, they don't stare at Krishna, and they don't look at him frontally. It's advised not to look at the face of the Lord, at least not initially, but to direct your gaze to the feet of the Lord. Those feet of the Lord can procure for us all blessings, all favors, ultimate liberation into the eternal spiritual world. So we focus on the feet of the Lord. And then when the priest puts this crown with feet on top of our head and says, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadabasanti Suryo Deviva Chaksaratam Yadvi Pashva Bupanyo Jagavam Saminide Vishnu Paramam. The blessing is, may you always, as you are now, don't be like this and challenging everybody and thinking, I'm the cat's meow, I'm the king of the mountain. No, we are all Arisabhabita Ekara Ishvara. There's one supreme, dominant, controlling Lord from whom we all emanate. Like there's a fire and then there are sparks from the fire. So similarly, we need to be submissive when it comes to the Supreme Personality. And when we stand before the deity form of the Lord in the temple, we're exposing ourselves to His. We're not there to stare at Him and to look at Him. We're there so that He can look at us. And when He looks at us, it would stand us in very good stead if we don't adopt a challenging posture or demeanor like this. So with hands folded and shoulders hunched, head bowed, dipped in a submissive posture, we receive the blessing from the priest that may you always, whatever opulence, talents, and abilities that you're enriched, that you're gifted with, that you didn't create yourself, may you always live your life in an attitude of deep gratitude to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and use those gifts in His service, using back what you've received to the Lord, creating that reciprocation, the two-way. If you're an electrician, nothing happens unless you have two-way. The AC doesn't do it, the DC doesn't do it. You have to have AC, DC before the power is available. So it's not a matter of just accepting, taking from the Lord, and then shunting off your talents and abilities, your artistic talents, your literary talents, your money-making talents, and then garnering, squandering all that on yourself and the extensions of yourself, your family members. No, that's not acceptable. Evam pravartitam chakram. What you receive, you need to be intensely grateful for that and create the two-way dynamic. As you receive, you give back. What you receive, what you're gifted from the Lord, you then honor the Lord with your words, your deeds, your intellect, your talents, whatever it is that you have. And that creates a perfect circle. When the Lord sees that what He's invested in you is coming back, then He gives you more. He increases. He expands His portfolio in you. And this is the secret of wealth and prosperity. Those who squander the gifts that the Lord has given them, or who lavish them on themselves or the extensions of themselves, it is said that when you get blessings from the Lord and then parlay that into material accumulation, wealth, and live a big house on the top of the hill and a fast car with sizzle factor, it is said you can retain that wealth for an average of about 10 years. But after 10 years, the Lord sees that I've invested so much in them and nothing's coming back, then it's cut off. Generally, after 10 years of gaining wealth illicitly without acknowledging and recognizing the Lord, then that wealth generally dries up. But the wealth, the blessings, the favor of those who are connected in devotional service to the Lord never stops. It's like a tap. You turn it on and it just pours. And the stream gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. Thanks, Anjali. She says, two-way dynamic. Receive what you've gifted, give back, and then in capitals, a perfect circle. And she's got a little sort of chakra emoji there. Thanks for that, Anjali. Ajay Gupta, thanks for jumping on board with a good hearty Hare Krishna. Same for Radhe Sham. Anjali also says you can retain that wealth for an average of 10 years, and then the Lord can cut it off. So here is a verse. This is, if Prashant's here, I don't know if, I think I saw Prashant, I think I saw a reference in Prashant before it slipped down. I can only see 4 comments at a time. But this is, if you're out there, Prashant, this is the 22nd verse. In the same chapter, actually we're going to come to this verse probably in about a month or so. We're on the 10th verse. This is the 22nd verse. It could take us a month or even 2 months before we actually progress at our snail's pace to arrive at the 22nd verse in this 5th chapter, the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But this is a classic verse. In fact, one time in Australia, Prabhupada was hosting several dignitaries, several higher-ups, I think in the Catholic or the Church of England. And Prabhupada asked for this reference. The reference, he was showing them Swarup Damodar's book, The Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness, and bragging on his disciples who had used their training, their degrees, their BAs, their master's degrees, their PhDs. In this case, Swarup Damodar had a PhD in chemistry, I think from, Avery University, somewhere in Georgia. So Prabhupada was bragging on his disciples who gave back, who had received higher education, and then used that degree, that PhD in chemistry, then to prove and to honor the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original creator of all the 108 elements of the periodic table, the original chemist who mixed everything together and created this incredible, phenomenal world. Prabhupada asked for the reference, and I came up with it. I sat there, and I was sitting there in a corner room. Prabhupada said, what is this reference? That one should use Shritasya, Shuktasya, Jabudi, Tapasya, Shritasya, whatever talent, whatever learning, whatever education, whatever enrichment, whatever austerities you've done, whatever sacrifices you've done, whatever chanting of hymns you've done, whatever advancement of knowledge you've committed, it should all culminate in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry. And when I came up with this verse, Prabhupada looked at me and, good. This is what I said 50 years ago at the lotus feet of my swan-like spiritual master. Idam hi pamsas tapasas sutasyava suitasya shuktasya taburit avituto rita kavibinurpito yad utamashoka gunarnavananam. Udamashloka. Those are those words which are above the darkness of matter. Words which describe celebrities, sports icons, PhDs, Nobel Prize winners, political leaders, prime ministers. Those are words which are relished by crows. They're penned, recited by crows about crows. We talked yesterday about how men who are two-legged animals, dogs, hogs, camels, and asses, they revere, they have as their mahajanas, their trendsetters, those whom they focus upon and take and get spoon-fed their views of the world. Those men who are hardly better than animals because they fail to realize the potential of the human form of life, they worship, they set on a pedestal other animal-like men who have no idea of the absolute truth. Blind leading the blind is a good way of describing modern society. They have no clue where they're going, who they are, what is the purpose of life, who created us, from where we get our talents and abilities, as if we created them. That's a joke. Give no credence, no acknowledgement whatsoever to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and just blindly forge their way ahead with their own self-interest as the main guiding light. People who are blind followers follow such other blind men and allow themselves to be taken advantage of and exploited and misled by them, the result of which is that when a blind population follows blind leaders who have no knowledge of the absolute truth, they all fall into a ditch. And that's why these words, these blind leaders, are rejected by the swan-like men. Swans have no taste in sifting through garbage or roadkill in order to eat that which has already been rejected by others. Therefore, it is said, "Idami pumsam tapasashu tashiva sritasya shuktasya jabut avitu toditir kabir yad utamashoka gananavanam." Consecrate, purify. Here's your thought for the day. Material. We always say material this and material that. We're anti-materialists. We want to be on the spiritual side rather than the material side. What makes something material is our own misuse use of it. Everything is pure, everything is spiritual, everything is, in a sense, either the direct or the indirect energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how can anything be material? How can anything be polluted or contaminated? It's on us. There's nothing wrong with this world. There's nothing wrong with the creation of God. Everything emanates from the all good, all pure Supreme Personality of Godhead. So intrinsically and originally, everything is good, as are we ourselves good, obviously, being emanations from the internal spiritual potency of the Lord. But when we misuse our independence and shunt material things and talents and abilities off for our own so-called promotion and aggrandizement, what we create the problem. We're the problem. God's not the problem. His material or spiritual creation is not the problem. We are the problem. We need to zero in on that. We need to identify ourselves as the problem, not worry about what's happening externally. Without our interference and involvement, and without our putting our dirty little hands on nature and the energies of God, everything would be pure and pristine, orderly, harmonic, symphonic, you might say. So if you gotta talk about problems, you want to talk about inequities in human society, you want to talk about the haves and the has-nots, you want to talk about the exploitation of the animals, you want to talk about the pollution of the environment, you want to talk about climate change, start right here. Start right here. Because it all comes from the dirtiness in our own hearts. It all comes from that point in time at which we falsely claim God's property as our own. Ishtan bogini bodhima dasyanti terdatanapati yobukta stena evacha. It is said those who take the sunlight, the water, the air, the breath of life, the grains and foodstuffs that the earth bountifully gives us after planting and weeding and cultivating, those who take them and fail to acknowledge the Lord by offering back to Him, they are no better than thieves. They have the criminal mentality. Anabhavati bhutani pardon ana yagya karma samudra. We all require food grains, ana, in order to eat. Well, where do ana come from? Ana, food grains come from rains. If you don't have rain, doesn't matter how good a seed you have, doesn't matter how well you've tilled the soil, doesn't matter how nicely and perfectly you've planted it. If you don't have rain, you're not going to have food grains. So where's rain come from? Rain comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how do you activate the Supreme Personality of Godhead? It says, Yagnar tat kamano nyata, lokyam kamano, tadartam kamagandi, mukta sangha samacharam. We are meant, we are created, we are wired to give in sacrifice to the Supreme Lord. Sacrifice, break down the word. Sacra means sacred, and facie from Latin means to make. Sacrifice just means to make of every act in your life, turn it into something sacred. Everything is spiritual. It's only our misuse of the things of this world that create the misery and the suffering and the inequities. So if we keep to the original plan and stay true to the person that we are created to be, which is an eternal servant of the Lord, and never think of anything separate, yasa, sarva, sarambara, tama, sankapa, navarjana, not claiming anything as our own, recognize that we come with nothing, we leave with nothing, and accepting whatever comes our way as a result of our honest hard work as ultimately the blessings, the favor of the Lord, and then some or other offering it back to the Lord in sacrifice. I explained this principle many years ago to a visitor who walked in the door in Australia. I said, we don't eat any food which isn't offered first in sacrifice to the Lord. We cook vegetarian food according to the prescription of the Lord. Prepare it lovingly. If possible, you grow your own food, and you cut it up, you prepare it, you cook it. You don't taste the food when you're cooking in the kitchen. You want the Lord to be the first enjoyer. You put it on a little silver tray, you offer it up to the Lord. You bow down, you say, Lord, please enjoy this offering, which is made in love and devotion and recognition that we owe everything to you, that without you we couldn't survive even for a moment. And as I was explaining this to the visitor, their eyes got big and they had more and more of a shocked expression on their face. And I was wondering, like, what am I leaving out? What's wrong with my explanation? Why am I not making this connection? And then at the end he said, You mean you don't eat anything? You give it all to everything? You offer it to the Lord in sacrifice, and do you starve? You look well fed to me, but you starve? So then I realized you always have to be careful when you explain the process of sacrifice, that the Lord is so kind, he doesn't take it away. He doesn't disappear from the altar and leave you like hungry there, famished. Like, Lord, what about me? It's not like that. He doesn't need to eat the food. He's supremely spiritual. He's always self-satisfied. But he accepts the offering out of kindness. We need Nitya Siddha Krishna Premasada. Jivarusha Bhai Nitya Krishnadas. We are by constitution, by nature, the eternal servants of Krishna. So he appears before us in the deity form out of his mercy, and he kindly accepts the food that we offer him just by hearing our prayers, by glancing at it. Food stays there, it doesn't go anywhere. Then we become purified by eating what we call the remnants of sacrifice. And usually when you say remnants, it means somebody else has taken all the good parts. And what's left are the remnants. Usually in the material world, crows, that's what crows eat, remnants, things that are discarded, that are used, out of whom the juice has been squeezed and they're just tossed away. That's what remnants means in the material world. But the remnants of sacrifice are foodstuffs which have been consecrated and blessed. It's called prasadam. They're free of karma. Any negative reactions have been extracted. So not only do we get to take the remnants of sacrifice, but we get to feast on sumptuous prasadam, which is not only vegetarian and healthier for us, but it also is karma-free. Yagya sishna shinoshana munchate sava bunjate te tuagam ye pachati adukaranam. Those who eat the remnants of sacrifice purify their whole existence. They remain firmly situated in the middle of transcendence. On the other hand, those who eat food which is not offered to sacrifice, even if it's vegetarian food, verily they eat only sin. It is declared by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Anjali says, do you starve? You look well fed to me. In those days, I didn't look as well fed as I do now, but I still wasn't, clearly, I still wasn't starving. Anjali says, keep to the original plan and stay true to the person we are meant to be, serving the Lord, accepting what comes our way as honest, hard work, offering back to the Lord as sacrifice. The problem starts when we claim God's property as our own. And we need to, first and foremost, look to ourselves. Physician, heal thyself. There's nothing wrong with anything. The only blip, the only anomaly, the only road bump, the only dark spot is right in here. Karma Brahma Bhavani Brahma Kshara Tajman Savan Nityage Pradishanam. It says the way to transcendence, to eat transcendence, to think transcendence, to speak transcendence, to work transcendence, the funnel is through yajna, is to sacrifice. That doesn't mean to give it up, to go without, as I just explained. We don't go without food, but we feast. We enjoy, we savor the remnants of the sacred, consecrated food which comes off the altar. It's called Maha Prasadam. Maha Prasadam. This is a very interesting verse here. This is in the 15th verse of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Karma Brahma Bhavan Vidi, Brahma Kshara Samud, Tajmad Yarga, Tajmad Sarvagatam Brahma, Nitya Yaga Pratishtatam. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifest from the Supreme Personality of God, and consequently the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. When advancement of knowledge is applied, Prabhupada says, in the service of the Lord, the whole process becomes absolute. The personality of God and his transcendental name, form, glory, etc. are all non-different from him. Eka desha sito nagnir jyochna bistiriyan parasha brahmana shaktish tatetum akarajagat. You have a fire, and then you have the heat and light from the fire. The fire might be 20 feet away from you on a cold winter's day. I remember I grew up, my parents inherited through my father's side a house in Pennsylvania, in Stallstown, just not far from Ligonier, Latrobe, Johnstown, just near the Pennsylvania Turnpike, 4 miles from the Donegal exit. In case you're looking, in case you want to, we have our cell phone now, and it says add location. So I just added location. You can actually pin it if you want. But what was so special about that? It was built during the Revolutionary War. My dad had a deed that the house was built in 1774 or something like that. Big stones, the walls were like 3 feet wide. The windowsills, because of the stones, you could sit in the windowsills. They were framed with wood. You could sit in the windowsills. And the most interesting thing about this house that we lived in, on about half an acre of land, was that in every downstairs room, the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen, there was a big fireplace. So on a winter's day, and the fireplace in the kitchen, the hearth, there was a stone slab, there was a grate, and then there was an iron arm that would swing out. They used to hang their pots on in the Revolutionary Day, and they would swing it back, and they would cook their soups and everything. And then when they wanted to, serve it, they would swing this iron bar, which was on a hinge on the corner of the fire. And above it was a big, like a half of an oak tree set, and on that a mantle set. And the oak tree had holes so that the fire could ventilate and then there was, of course, a chimney. So we would sit on a winter's day, and sometimes you get pretty big snow drifts in Pennsylvania in the wintertime. And we would go out and shovel snow and cut wood and stuff like that. And we'd come in, and we'd want to be warm. And so we would sit by the fire. I still remember, so many years later, the relief, the comfort of coming into the kitchen with the family, warming your hands and feet by the fire. If you were frostbitten, you put your hands in cold water, accelerate the departure of the frostbite. But you never got in the fire. You say, oh, the fire feels so good. That means the heat and light from the fire, the energy from the fire that you're feeling from a distance feels so good. But because on a certain level we acknowledge the non-difference of the fire from its energies, we say the fire feels so good. If you were in the fire, it wouldn't feel good at all. It would be the most agonizing thing. But because the energies of light and heat we recognize as non-different from the fire, we say the fire feels so good. Similarly, God is the fire as well as the heat and light. He's the separate, individual, transcendental Lord of his own planet called Goloka Vrindavan, which is the topmost planet of all the spiritual planets in the spiritual world. So he's at a distance. At the same time, he's everything. He's remote, and he's closer to you than a brother. That same transcendent Lord, who has his own ultimate abode in the spiritual world, to which we aspire to return in due course of time, has extended and expanded himself, telescoped himself into each and every atom, into the hearts of all living beings. The conclusion is there's nothing but God. There's nothing but God. He is remote, and he is in the proximity of ourselves. Everything. There's nothing outside of the what is that verse? Pantashtu koti sadavatsara vayara tapi manashi sopyashti apashinvishinte govinam adipurusham andantarashta paramantur shayantarashtam. The smallest entity of which we are aware with our scientific instruments is the atom. So it is said that the Lord enters within paramanu chayantarashtam. Whatever the smallest particle, kavim paranam manushasan anura niyamsha manushva. He's the biggest, he's the Vishwarup, he's the universal form, and he's the smallest. He remains invisible and unseen, powering within the atom itself. The conclusion is that there is nothing but God. And if we also retain our original God consciousness, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Karanai, we are all originally and constitutionally, eternally servants of Krishna. We've forgotten that, created all the problems, ecologically, sociologically, medically, economically, politically, all the problems we have created in God's perfect creation because we forgot God. So our encouragement, our hearty and strong and urgent encouragement is begin to rectify that omission on our part by remembering Him. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And here's a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmana Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Shamadina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna or spiritual consciousness, our original consciousness, true to the person that we were created to be, and to our loving Father from who we are an emanation. He's God. He created us to love Him and to serve Him and to be loved and be served by Him. What we have to put into the gap between the two is our acknowledgement, our loving, devotional service, appreciation, and gratitude towards Him. So that is what it means by a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And if you make that connection, if everything clicks together, and in exchange for all that the Lord gives us, we begin to give back to Him in sacrifice, we are assured of attaining the spiritual kingdom. Why? Brahmaiva tena gantavyam. Because of our full consciousness of spiritual activities, wherein that which is offered, the offer, the offering process, the offering ingredients, and the recipient of the offering are all of the same spiritual nature. It's just a matter of being true to who you are and who God created you to be. Now this verse is describing the ancient Vedic formal rituals and sacrifices. There was a lot of formality. There was a lot of ritual and protocol if you were going to do those sacrifices, particularly in the Treta Yuga age. Treta Yadayate Vishnu Dwarpari Parichayatam Kriti Yadyato Vishnu Treta Yajata Makaya. The process for God realization in the former age, the Treta age, the silver age of the cosmic year, was to offer sacrifice. And the process was very elaborate, very expensive, and extremely ritualized. The Brahmins were so good at chanting mantras that they could start the sacrificial fire just by chanting the mantra. They could take an old animal, like a cow, and by offering that animal in sacrifice and using their mantras to manipulate matter, they would revive that animal and give him a new body, a new life. At the end of these elaborate sacrifices, the Lord Himself would come on Garuda to accept his offerings, and then getting the darshan of the Lord, everybody in the whole region, the whole kingdom, the whole empire would become self-realized. So the language of this verse harks back to the ancient Vedic sacrifices, of course, which are no longer extant. We don't have the qualified Brahmins, we don't have the wealth, we don't have the interest even We don't have the resources nor the energy to marshal all those resources to do sacrifices just like they did in the old days. But we can still, with whatever we've got, and putting ourselves in the fire of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and eating only sanctified food offered to Krishna, we can still completely purify our lives and the lives of our loved ones. The language in this verse, Brahmarpanam. Brahma means spirit. And the spirit is everywhere. Just like light and heat emanates a great distance from the fire. The fire is localized, but the light and heat go all over. They go throughout the entire room. So God is one, but through the diffusion of his energies, he's everywhere present. So you can say in that sense, everything is Brahman, recognizing that Krishna is the supreme Brahman. But in the form of his energies, everything is Brahman. From Arpanam. Arpanam means the various utensils, the various things that are offered. Remember, picture in your mind a traditional Vedic sacrifice with Brahmins and ghee and sacred auspicious herbs and the sacrificial fire and the chanting, the perfect chanting with perfect accents and pronunciation of the Vedic hymns. Shaha Om Sahasra Shirsa Purusha Sahasraksa Sahasapat Sabamam Vishado Vidya Charista Dishangalam Shaha Purushavidam Savam Yaksputam Yaksha Utamrita Dusheshana Yadina Taroti Shaha Idavanasha Mahimato Jigamsha Parosham Tadovishambira Shaha. Everything done perfectly. Every I dotted, every T crossed. So Arpanam refers to the traditional items which are offered in sacrifice. Brahma Havir. Havir is the ghee. Havir comes from hu, which means to pour. So the ghee, it's very expensive. If you go to buy ghee nowadays, it's like $4, $5 a pound. It's purified or clarified butter. So the ghee was offered as the most pure byproduct of the mother cow's milk. The ghee was offered. Ghee never goes rancid, by the way. Any of those impurities that cause butter to go rancid after sitting at room temperature for 4 or 5 days, those have been slowly cooked off by the process of making ghee and scraped off at the top. So the ghee itself never ever goes rancid. It is liquid sunshine, liquid health, liquid representation of God. As you might know, we spent the first 5 years of our Krishna conscious career in Australia. And they had the best ghee in the world. It was called a Lowry's ghee. We would buy it in cardboard boxes, 40-pound cardboard boxes. Never needed to be refrigerated. And we had one of those long stainless steel cutting tables, prep tables. And underneath there was another shelf. So I remember we'd keep the ghee in the box. It was a cardboard box, and then there was a liner, thick plastic liner. And we would keep an ice cream scoop in there. So whenever we need ghee, we cooking or frying or anything that we needed ghee, we just reach down under and bring up an ice cream scoop of ghee and apply it to whatever it was we were cooking. It never went bad. And the ghee was so good from Australia that Prabhupada had me arrange shipments of ghee to Mayapur. Can you imagine? India is the land of cows, but Prabhupada didn't think the ghee that they produced commercially in India was as good, as high quality, had the integrity of the ghee, of the Lowry's ghee. If you're from Lowry's in Australia, you owe me something. You owe me a commission. You owe me for this commercial, okay? But Prabhupada could deem that Lowry's ghee was more pure than the ghee which was commercially produced in India. So I would ship the ghee to Mayapur when I was in Australia. So Brahma Havir, Krishna says, I am all the articles and paraphernalia which are offered in the sacrifice. Brahma Havir, I am the ghee. Brahmagno, agno means the fire. You cannot have a sacrifice in a traditional sense without a fire. Because the fire transforms the gross elements into the subtle elements, which then becomes off, and it causes everything to rise, and then that is acceptable. It's digestible, acceptable by the higher, more subtle beings. Brahmana hutam brahmaiva tentavyam. So the things that are offered are spirit. The ghee, which is poured onto the fire, is spirit. The fire is spirit. The object, the one whom we hope to please in the performance of this sacrifice, whose glories the priests are all chanting, and to whom we are giving the oblations of the sacrifice, he is Paramam Brahman, he is Paramam, he is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then the performer or the sponsor, the one who is organized the sacrifice, the producer, you might say, is in transcendental, is meant to be fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness or God consciousness. So everything is spirit. God is spirit, the paraphernalia is spirit, the fire is spirit, the ghee that you offer on the fire is spirit, and then you have to make sure in all of that that you are spiritually absorbed. Some people do sacrifices and go to get trouble and expenses to offer to the demigods, or to offer for material remuneration, or offer for elevation to heavenly planets. You need to make sure that you're in sync with the fact that everything is Krishna. It comes from Krishna. It is the diffused energy of Krishna. Krishna has entered into everything. Krishna is non-different from his energies. And so you need to be, or you would have needed to be in those old days with the traditional factor, entirely in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. And even Sukracharya, one of the greatest sacrificial priests that ever lived, he also confirmed, even if there should be some mistakes or omissions or commissions, which shouldn't be there in the performance of the sacrifice, wherever there's the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, any mistakes, commissions that shouldn't have been done, omissions that were left out that should not have been left out, mantra tanstadadishanam deshakara harakara govindabhina, as long as the chanting of Hare Krishna is there, as long as the purpose of the sacrifice is to satisfy Krishna, then everything retains its pure spiritual quality. Similarly, we don't have the priest to chant the mantras. We don't have the ghee, the purity of the ghee. We don't have the money. We can't marshal an entire population of the state of Utah to support and to patronize such a traditional Vedic sacrifice. But the good news is that wherever there's the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and the offering of pure vegetarian foodstuff for the service and the satisfaction of the Lord, everything is spiritual. And Prabhupada confirms that this is a process, chanting the holy name of the Lord, and offering your food, doing everything for Krishna, even though you may not have the traditional fire, the traditional Brahmins, the traditional means of sponsoring a traditional sacrifice such as was done in past ages. If you put everything in the fire of offering to Krishna, ihayasya hare dasya manasa karmana gira nikadasha jivan mukta sauchate, he or she will be liberated. Who? Ihayasya hare dasya, who does everything. Yad karosya, whatever you give, whatever austerities you perform, whatever you give away, do it as a servant, thinking of yourself as a servant. And what you do, make it an offering to Krishna. That is the definition of someone who is pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is consecrating all the words, all the deeds, and all the thoughts in their life in the service of the Lord. And even in this present conditioned state, even in this temporary current material body, such a person is described in the scripture and by the Lord himself as a liberated soul. Jivan mukta sauchate. It is said of that person, even though they are in a material body, that they are jivan mukta, that soul has now reached the threshold of immortality. That soul who may have been sojourning in this material world for countless hundreds, thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands of previous incarnations, has now, by consecrating their mind, their words and deeds in the service of the Lord, come to the threshold of the spiritual world which we left so long ago. And Krishna's preparing to set a table for us in the words of Lord Jesus Christ, to sit us on his right-hand side and welcome us back to home, back to God. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'm so glad that Anjali's been with us today, making profuse comments and livening up the comments section here. And we also appreciate, she's even given us a lot of quotes from the Veda base, filling the gap left by Prashant. I'd like to thank Bhai Bobby also for profuse comments. Yeah, we've got 30 comments, which is very respectable. I remember this time yesterday we only had 13. So you can tell the difference when Anjali's there. Not only does Anjali comment profusely, but it inspires others to do the same. And that's what we want. A lot of interactivity. It's all about AC/DC, isn't it? Bhakti Koti, Hari Hari. The 14 people who have hit the like button are Divya Joshi, Hare Krishna Divya, Chaitanya Mangaladas, Jai Prabhuji, Lakshmi Nashringa. If you want to jump in, now's the time. Now's the time for your kirtan. I'm ready to do kirtan, but only in the event that you don't come on board. Thomas Wayne, pranams, Thomas, Radhe Sham, translating all of Prabhupada's works into Kazakhstan so the people there can get benefit from those swan-like words of the pure devotee. Bhakti Gary, namaste. Bhakti Gary's transcribing some of our talks. Sundari Priya, we can't say enough about the devotional qualities of Sundari Priya. Anjali, so glad that you were able to be with us today. You pumped up the whole atmosphere. You pumped me up by your presence. Ram Kishore Das, by Bobby, of course, my better half. Raleigh, who helps hold the fort down, make sure everything goes on here in Spanish Fork, Utah. Gene, I don't think he's missed a single one of our sessions during the entirety of COVID. And Natasha Johnson is becoming more and more of a regular. All right, we'll finish with some chanting here on Transcendental Tuesday. Obviously, we're going to visit this verse again because we're hardly even scratching the surface. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. So appreciative to each and every one of you for joining us, inspiring us, enthusing us. And don't forget the AC/DC. We try and give what we can, feed you, you feed us with comments, feedback, questions. And in the course of all this coming and going, the reciprocity, all this energy and interactivity, we some or other expand our influence throughout the cyberspace, throughout the internet, so that others come across us by accident. Nothing happens by accident. They're meant to come across the lotus feet of Krishna. They're meant to intersect with those swan-like words which are meant to describe the Lord, which alone can purify and sanctify the entire universe. So let's work together to expand Krishna consciousness. There are so many powerful, purified, realized devotees from iskcon now who appear on Zoom. It's becoming problematic now to make a decision who you're going to listen to on any given day, because there are so many well springs of nourishment and inspiration out there. I'm just a, whatever I've gotten from others who poured into me. And there's so much out there. Please take advantage of all the great realized souls. We're really crushing the opposition. I don't find anyone out there with the wealth and the depth of knowledge and realization of the devotees from the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And I can't tell you how honored and privileged I am to be a small foot soldier, to be a private in the great, great transcendental army of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for listening. This has been Transcendental Tuesday. We look forward to continuing our discussion on the transcendental words of the swan-like men tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, one more thing. A word from Rob. Are you out there, Rob? You want to give us some little morsel for thought before we go?
I am Prabhuji. I can attempt to do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
My takeaway from today is that when we forget our purpose and our reason for being here, we create our material problems. And if we remember and live our reason for existence to love and to serve Krishna, our material problems will lose their potency, and we will become more spiritual and more connected with the plan that Krishna has for us.
Wonderful. Yeah, just 25 words or less. What it took me 45 minutes. Whatever you feed gets strong. So we see, as we begin to feed our own spiritual selves, as we begin to consecrate our lives by doing everything, putting everything on the altar for Krishna, we'll see that the energy, that which sustains climate change, potential wars and divisiveness and hatred and suspicion and mistrust amongst human beings, that which powers the pandemics of viruses and bacteria, as well as hate and depression and low self-esteem and negativity. Well, as we nourish ourselves, as we divert our resources and our abilities in the way that they were meant to be used for the service of Krishna, this will take away the power of Maya to subvert and to downgrade this material world. Prabhupada gave the example of pulling the fan out of the socket. Once you pull the plug of the fan out of the socket, the fan may keep spinning, but it has no more power to continue in the same way that it did before. So when you're chanting Hare Krishna, you're doing the very best work that you can to dry up, to starve all those demoniac negative powers that are creating an unwanted situation on the world today. So continue to chant, take prasadam. It's a solution to all the problems that the world faces. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,